So good afternoon. So we are talking about the interrupt programming in the last class. In that we have seen timer interrupts, and we have seen some examples. Today we shall look at some more examples. Write a program that continuously get 8-bit data from P0 and send it to P1 while simultaneously creating a square wave of 200 microseconds on P2.1. Use timer 0 to create the square wave. Assume that XTAL is equal to 11.0592 megahertz. In this particular program, the main program, that is the main task, is to read a data from port 0 and you have to copy the same data on port 1. That is the main job. Whenever there is an interrupt, it will jump to an interrupt service subroutine, which will create a square wave of 200 microseconds. So, timer of the microcontroller, timer 0 of the microcontroller is programmed in mode 2 auto reload mode with a timer register initial count of 92, minus 92, minus 92, because the period is 200 microseconds, so one pulse width, that is on period, is 100. So 100 divided by 1.085 gives you 92. So minus 92. Minus 92 is nothing but FF minus 92, or you can straight away write minus 92. You have to initially load the timer and configure port 0 as input port. How do you configure the port 0 as input port? You have to make P0, you have to copy P0 as FF, then it will configure itself as an input port. Then enable the interrupt. What interrupt? Timer interrupt. Timer flag interrupt. Start the timer. So read port 0, copy it to port 1. So this is the main job. So this is the main job. So this is the main job. So the main task, suppose if you take any interrupt programming environment, there will be two jobs. One is the main job, the other one is the job which is taken care by the interrupt. The microcontroller will be doing its normal main job. So in this case, as an example, the normal main job is reading the data from port 0 and copying it to port 1. When the microcontroller is doing this main job, in between, there will be an interrupt from the external device. In this case, that job which is handled by the interrupt service subroutine, we are taking an example of generating a square wave using the timer interrupt, using the timer. So square wave frequency is 200 microseconds. So on period in that square wave is 100 microseconds. That should be divided by the clock frequency of the microcontroller, which is 1.085 microsecond clock period. So you will get 92. So your timer interrupt TH0, timer register TH0 should be loaded with minus 92. And interrupt should be enabled. Which interrupt? Timer interrupt. So you keep on doing your main job. Later, when your TH0 minus 92 is nothing but A4, it increments until it increments F till FF and it rolls over. That is, what do you mean by rolling over? It once again it will be initially reloaded with the initial count. What is the initial count? A4. So when the timer register rolls over, there is an interrupt. When there is an interrupt, what happens? It will go to a subroutine called as the interrupt service subroutine. You can just see, this is your interrupt service subroutine. You can just see the mouse movement. This is your interrupt service subroutine. There what you are writing, you just see, you are complementing P2.1. Earlier it was 0. After 100 microsecond, you complement. It becomes 1. Once again, when it reaches FF, once again it rolls over. Once again it comes back here. Once again it complements. So from 1 it complements to 0. So like that, you will have a pulse of 100 microsecond which appears like a square wave. When this particular square wave generated, when the timer increments from A4 till FF and once again rolls back to A4, then there will be an interrupt. When there is an interrupt, it jumps to a subroutine called as interrupt service subroutine. In interrupt service subroutine, continuously you are writing to complement the data present on P2.1. If P2.1 is initially presenting 0, so after 100 microsecond, it will be complemented. It becomes 1. Once again, after 100 microsecond, it complements. It becomes 0. So like that, 0, 1, 0, 1, like this, it will be continuously generating so that it will look like a square wave. So generation of the square wave on P2.1 is a job handled by the interrupt. Reading the port 0 and writing it on port 1, that is the normal job which is taken care by the microcontroller main program. So this is a concept which has been demonstrated. Similarly, rewrite the example 11.2, that is this example, to create a square wave that has a high portion of 1085 microsecond and a low portion of 15 microsecond. That is, rather than a square wave, you are generating a rectangular wave here. That's all. So now let us see some external interrupts. 8051 has some two external interrupts, P3.2 and P3.3, INT0 and INT1, pin number 12 and pin number 13 of the microcontroller. It is used as the external hardware interrupts. The interrupt vector table location 0003 and 0013 are set aside for INT0 and INT1. Please note that. In interrupt vector table locations 0003 and 0013 are set aside for INT0 and INT1. They are the two external interrupts. So there are two activation levels for the external hardware interrupts. What is that? One is level triggered interrupt, other one is edge triggered interrupt. For the two external interrupts, there are two activation levels for the external hardware interrupts. One is level trigger, other one is edge trigger. So this is activation of INT0. INT0 is connected to P3.2. You can just see there is a switch there. One is IT0. It is denoted as when that is thrown to 0, it is converted to 1 and IE0 is enabled. That is, it is level trigger. When it is thrown to 1, it is edge trigger. Similarly here also. So interrupt 0 and interrupt 1 can be triggered or enabled in two ways. What is the first way? First way is level trigger. The other one is edge trigger. Edge trigger. In the level triggered mode, INT0 and INT1 are normally high. If a lowest level signal is applied to them, it triggers the interrupt. Then the microcontroller stops whatever it is doing and jumps to the interrupt vector table to service that interrupt. The low level signals at the INT pin must be removed before the execution of the last instruction of ISR, that is return on interrupt. Otherwise, another interrupt will be generated. Please understand about the level triggered interrupt. In case of the level triggered interrupt pins, that is INT0 and INT1 are normally high. You can just see in this diagram. You can just see this diagram. You can just see you are giving 0. You are giving 0 so that if there is, when there is an interrupt, sorry, when there is an inverter, it will be converted to logic 1. And when that logic 1 level is maintained, whenever the logic 1 level is maintained continuously, the interrupt will be enabled. Such an interrupt is called as level triggered interrupt. Why it is called as level triggered interrupt? Whenever the logic level 1 is maintained on that line, then it will be treated as there is an interrupt signal. There is an interrupt signal. So such an interrupt is called as level triggered interrupt. Level triggered interrupt. The other, whenever there is such a level triggered interrupt, so if a low level signal is applied to them, because there is an inverter, it triggers the interrupt, then the microcontroller stops whatever it is doing and jumps to the interrupt vector table to service that interrupt. The low level signal at the INT pin must be removed before the execution of the last instruction in interrupt service subroutine, that is return on interrupt. Before it is executing return on interrupt, the signal on this line, that is level signal on the particular INT line, should be removed. Otherwise, one more interrupt will be triggered. So this is called level triggered or level activated interrupt and is the default mode upon the reset of 8051. That is, when 8051 is reset, always it will be by default set to a level triggered interrupt. Example 11.5. Assume that INT1 pin is connected to a switch that is normally high. Whenever it goes low, it should turn on an LED. The LED is connected to P1.3 and is normally off. So when it is turned on, it should stay for a fraction of a second. So as long as the switch is pressed low, LED should be stay on. So this is an example for level triggered interrupt. Here you can just see that. You can just see set B P1.3. Why you are setting V P1.3? You are turning on the LED. And you are keeping the LED turned on until some very short delay, 255 count you are loading in R3 and you are simply discriminating until it reaches 0. After that, you are clearing P1.3 and returning to interrupt, returning to main program. So in the main program, what you have done, you have enabled the external interrupt using that particular command move I, 1000010 binary. That is the bit number 3 from right is 1 means INT1 is enabled. INT1 is enabled. And you are waiting then. After that, you are simply waiting until a switch is pressed. So when a switch is pressed, pressing the switch will cause the LED to be turned on. If it is activated, so upon it is activated, it stays on. So that is right. So in the main program, we are just enabling the interrupt. So when you press the switch, what happens? LED will turn on. So that you are handling it in the interrupt service subroutine. Simple program. So pin 3.2 and pin 3.3 are used for normal IO unless INT0 and INT1 bits in IE register is enabled. So you know that there is an interrupt enable register that we have seen. So in the last class itself, we have seen that interrupt enable register. Once again, I will show the, see, this is interrupt enable register that you can just see, pin number, bit number 3. External interrupt 1 is IE.2. When you are making it 1, it will be automatically set to level triggered interrupt. So in the IE register, you have to enable it. That's all. So after the hardware interrupts in the IE registers are enabled, the controller keeps sampling interrupt pin for a low level signal once each machine cycle. That is, after each machine cycle, microcontroller checks the interrupt pin, INT0 or INT1. If there is a low signal, it understands that there is an interrupt. It will automatically automatically jumps to interrupt service subroutine. It automatically jumps to interrupt service subroutine. That is, for every machine cycle, microcontroller verifies INT pin. If there is a low signal on INT pin, microcontroller treats that there is an interrupt. So according to one manufacturer's data, the pin must be held in the low state until the start of the execution of the ISR. If the INTN pin is brought back to a logic high state before the start of execution of ISR, then there will not be any interrupt. If INT1 pin is left at a logic level low after RETI instruction of the ISR, another interrupt will be activated after one instruction is executed. So that is very important. As it is a level triggered interrupt, you have to take back the level before the return on interrupt, RETI instruction in the ISR. Before that itself, you have to remove that level. Otherwise what happens? The microcontroller will automatically execute the logic low level present on INT pin. So this is very important. So pin 3.2 and pin 3.3 are used for normal IO unless INT0 and INT1 pins are programmed in IE register. After hardware interrupts in the IE registers are enabled, the controller keeps the sampling the INT pin for every machine cycle. If the INT pin is low, then it will be considering that it is then interrupt. If the INT pin is not low, it will not consider it as an interrupt. To ensure the activation of the hardware interrupt at the INTN pin, make sure that the duration of the low level signal is around 4 machine cycles, but not more than that. To ensure that the activation of the hardware interrupt at the INT pin, what you have to do? You have to make sure that the duration of the low level signal is around 4 machine cycle, but not more. So this is due to the fact that level triggered interrupt is not latched. Level triggered interrupt is not latched. So you have to keep the low level signal on hardware interrupt INT pin for at least 4 machine cycle. Then it will consider that there is an interrupt. So this is due to the fact that level is not latched. Thus, the pin must be held in a low state until the start of the ISR execution. Until the interrupt service subroutine starts executing, you should make sure that low level signal is put on INT pin. Low level signal is put on INT pin. To make INT0 and INT1 edge triggered interrupt, we must program the bits of TCON register. See, till here we have seen the INT0 and INT1 as level triggered interrupts. Suppose if you want to work with them as edge triggered interrupt, then what you need to do? You have to program a register called as TCON register. So the TCON register holds, among other bits, IT0 and IT1 flag bits. They determine the level or edge triggered mode of the hardware interrupt. IT0 and IT1 bits, D0 and D2 of the TCON register. So they are also referred as TCON.0 and TCON.1. 2, since the TCON register is bit addressable register. So you can just see here, this is TCON, timer counter register. So TF1, TCON.7, timer 1 overflow flag set by the hardware when the timer overflows, cleared by the hardware when the processor vectors to the interrupt service subroutine. TCON.6 is timer 1 control bit. TCON.5 timer 0 overflow flag. TCON.4 timer 0 control bit. TCON.3 external interrupt 1 edge flag set by the CPU when the external interrupt is edge is detected. TCON.2 interrupt 1 type control bit. TCON.1 is external interrupt 0. TCON.0 is interrupt 0 type control bit. So these are all the various fields of TCON register where you can enable edge triggered interrupt. That is very important. Till here we have seen only level triggered interrupt. That is, it would respect only the level, not the edge. Edge is always from 0 to 1 triggering end, or 1 to 0, one more trigger. So like that. Assume that pin 3.3 is connected to a pulse generator. Write a program in which falling edge of the pulse will send a high to P1.3, which is connected to LED or a buzzer. In other words, the LED is turned on and off at the same time at the same rate as the pulses applied to INT1 pin. So just using edge triggered interrupt, you are generating a pulse. So you are writing an ISR for hardware interrupt INT1 to turn on LED. You know that INT1 starting address of the ISR is 0013 always. This is for INT1. So your turn on LED P1 set PB set B P1.3 and you are keeping it for some time, that is for a delay count of 255. Then you are returning back after making it low. So in the main program, what I am doing, you are configuring tcon.2 as an edge triggered interrupt. Then you are enabling external interrupt and you will be waiting there. After enabling, you should wait. When there is an interrupt, so it will jump to a subroutine return at 0013. The subroutine return at 0013 is nothing but INT1 pin programming. INT1 is on. It is connected to a keyboard. It is connected to an LED. P1.3 is connected to an LED, and it will be on for some time with a delay count of 255. In edge triggered interrupts, the external source must be held high for at least one machine cycle and then low for at least another one machine cycle. So the falling edge of pins at INT0 and INT1 are latched by 8051 and are held by tcon.1 and tcon.3 bits of the tcon register. Function as interrupt in service flags. tcon.1 and tcon.3, they are functioning it as interrupt in service flags. It indicates that the interrupt is being serviced now and on this INT1 pin, and no new interrupt will be responded until the service is finished. So always the minimum pulse duration to detect the edge triggered interrupt is always one machine cycle. One machine cycle is always 1.085 microsecond. The external source must be held high. In case of an edge triggered interrupt, the external source must be held high for one machine cycle and then held low for another machine cycle. You can just see the diagram. So if any service is expected, minimum one machine cycle it should be high, and next one machine cycle it should be low. Then only it is taken as an interrupt signal on INT0 or INT1 external interrupt. So you can just see here tcon.1 and tcon.3. tcon.1 is external interrupt 0 edge flag. tcon.3 is external interrupt 1 edge flag. It is set by CPU always. A high to low signal. A high to low signal is recognized on tcon.1 and tcon.3 until one machine cycle high and another machine cycle low. Then only it will be taken as an edge signal. Then only it will be taken as an edge signal. That is very important. Then only will be taken as an edge signal. That is, you can just see, the external source must be held high for at least one machine cycle and then held low for at least another machine cycle. So for falling edge of INT0 and INT1 are latched by 8051 and are held by TCON.1 and TCON.3. So it indicates that interrupt is being serviced now and it will be on INTN pin and no new interrupt will be responded during the service is going on. So now I will ask in the chat box whether you have understood. Have you understood? Level triggered and edge triggered interrupts. So there are two types of external interrupts. One is INT0 and INT1. INT0 and INT1 can be programmed or can be treated either in a level triggered mode or in an edge triggered mode. By default, microcontroller will be programmed as in a level triggered mode. In case of a level triggered mode, the INT0 and INT1 pin should be kept low for at least 4 machine cycles. Then only that particular level will be considered. Suppose the pin INT0 and pin INT1 is kept low, then it will be taken as a level triggered interrupt, provided the low signal on INT0 and INT1 should be there for at least 4 machine cycles. So before the execution of return on interrupt in ISR, the low signal on the interrupt should be removed. Otherwise, it will be taken as the next interrupt. Suppose if you want to program microcontroller for an edge triggered interrupt, then you have to program a register called as TCON register. Register called as TCON register. So in TCON register, TCON.1 and TCON.3 are reserved for edge triggered enabled INT0 and INT1. Then the external source must send high for at least one machine cycle and then held low for at least another machine cycle. Then only it will be taken as an interrupt signal, an edge enabled or edge triggered interrupt signal. So regarding IT0 and IT1 bits in the TCON register, the following two points must be remembered or emphasized. When ISRs are finished, that is upon the execution of RETI, these bits TCON.1 and TCON.3 are clear, indicating that interrupt is finished and 8051 is already responded to another interrupt on that pin. So when the ISRs are finished, TCON.1 and TCON.3 should be cleared. So during the time that the ISR is being executed, INTN pin is ignored. No matter how many times it makes high to low transition, when some ongoing interrupt service subroutine execution is done, whatever is available on INTN pin is ignored. When RETI instruction is executed, automatically TCON.1 and TCON.3 are cleared so that new interrupt can be recognized. New interrupt can be recognized. What is the difference between RET and RETI instruction? Explain why we cannot use RET instead of RETI as the last instruction of an ISR. So this is a question. Both perform the same actions of popping of the 2 bytes of the stack into program counter and making 1851 return to where it is left off. There is no difference actually. As far as the execution of RET instruction is concerned, both RET and RETI are same. They will pop the first 2 bytes appearing on stack into the program counter and 8051 returns back to the point where it is called. However, RETI also perform an additional job of clearing the interrupt in service flag, indicating that servicing of the interrupt is over. That is only the difference. Difference is RETI instruction automatically clears the interrupt service flag. So, however, RETI also performs an additional task of clearing the interrupt in service flag, indicating that servicing of the interrupt is over. That is the difference between RET and RETI. If you write RET, it would not do this additional job of clearing the interrupt service flag. If you use RETI, it will do that also. If you use RET instead of RETI as the last instruction of the interrupt service subroutine, you simply block any new interrupt that pin on that pin after the first interrupt, since the pin status would indicate that interrupt is being still served. In case of TF0 and TF1, TCON.1, TCON.3, they are clear to the execution of RETI. That is why you have to use always, in case of interrupt service subroutine, you have to use RETI. So if you use RETI, what happens? When the program control transfers to the main program, automatically all the timer flags are clear. TCON.1 is clear, TCON.3 is clear, so that you need not worry about clearing the interrupt in service flags. Automatically it will be taken care, provided your interrupt for your if you use RET instead of RETI as the last instruction of interrupt service subroutine, you simply block any new interrupt, because when you are executing RET instruction, interrupt service flags are not clear. But in case of if you are using RETI at the interrupt service subroutine, automatically interrupt service flags are clear, so that the new interrupt can be recognized. Next is transfer interrupt TI. Transfer interrupt TI is raised when the last bit of the framed data in serial programming, that is the stop bit, is transferred, indicating that serial buffer register is ready to transfer the next byte. TI interrupt, transfer interrupt, is used in case of serial programming. TI is raised TI. So TI is raised when the last bit of the framed data, that is the stop bit, is transferred, indicating that SBUF register is ready to transfer the next byte. RI bit is raised when the entire frame of the data, including the stop bit, is received. In other words, when the SBUF register has a byte, RI is raised to indicate that the received byte needs to be picked up before it is lost by the new incoming serial data. So you have to understand there are two more interrupts. One is transfer interrupt. The other one is receiver interrupt. So TI is the transfer interrupt, RI is the received interrupt, which is used in case of the serial communication. TI is used whenever the last bit of the framed data is transferred, indicating that SBUF register is ready to transfer the next byte. RI is used when the entire frame of the data, including the stop bit, is received. So that serial buffer is full, it has to be emptied by a program so that before it is overwritten by a new incoming serial data. Just to indicate that the RI interrupt is used. So we will stop here and we will continue it in the next class.